Welcome back to The Price of Business. I'm your host, Kevin Price, talking about you and your business. I got the Price of Business contributor, Marc Krasney, on the phone. Marc is a regular contributor here on the program, an attorney extraordinaire, really helping people with preventative law, which is, I think, so smart in a litigious society that we live in. Marc, as always, glad to have you on the program. Welcome.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Hey, kind of give us the overview of the Krasney Law Firm.
Yeah, what we did several years ago was start this so that clients could get a lawyer much like the typical big law firm or big company would have an in-house counsel. And so we started something like it where all that gets referred to us on a flat fee basis so that client, whether it's a small company, mom and pop shop, or a large corporation, gets access to us on a flat fee basis, can call us with questions, we review contracts. We do the things much like a normal in-house counsel would do for a much cheaper price.
Very good. So when did you start this concept?
We started this March 2007, and the nice thing, we were just looking over this last couple of weeks, most of our clients have stayed with us because they believe in the product. You know, I liken it to insurance. Most of us don't ever use our car insurance, but that once every 10 years we do, we think, oh, glad I had that. Or when our circumstance, when a client has a question, they pick up the phone, they get access to us 24 hours a day, they get my cell phone, and that question gets answered now, instead of typically what happens is a customer or client would make the decision on their own, hoping they're correct, and then they roll the dice. And then a year down the road, they realize, you know what, that wasn't the right decision. Now I'm in some kind of a liability situation, whether it's a lawsuit, demand letter, or a problem, and that's typically when an hourly attorney gets involved. We try to avoid that. Yeah, that's very good. Anything you can do to spend time out of the courtroom is time spent making money. So I'm all over that. I like that concept. Yeah, what would you say is the big, well, let me just ask you what your issue is for us today. We always ask you to bring a topic, something to focus on for our audience. What do you have for us today? What I thought about was assumed names. Most people don't really think about this issue, but it's a huge issue because we'll start a company for a client and say it's, Kevin Price, Inc. Okay, you started a corporation, good for you. It's ready, it's up and going, and now we tell you, go make your money. Well, usually a month, 2 months, 6 months down the road, Kevin Price, Inc. decides, I just want to use the name Price or Kevin Price, or I want to do business as something else. You make letterhead, you make business cards, you do all those other things. Well, all those other names you choose to go by have nothing to do with Kevin Price, Inc., and so say you have some liability down the road and you get sued in that new name that you've used on your letterhead, your business cards, or emails, well, all of a sudden you realize you're in a position where you might have personal liability because you didn't file an assumed name record with the Secretary of State or the clerk's office in the county you're doing that business as. And so assumed names are a huge, tricky, scary proposition because most people forget to do it. Most people have an issue somewhere down the road when they didn't file those particular forms.
So if you get an assumed name, you better get it for your corporation, not for yourself.
Right. You want that assumed name, the company that you put on the letterhead, on the business card, in your emails, to get the same liability protections that your corporation we set up, your Kevin Price, Inc. that we set up for you, has. Otherwise, all of a sudden, whoever's using that name would potentially have personal liability. It might not matter too much if that person doesn't have any money, but if that person has some assets and there's a plaintiff's lawyer that can attach to them pretty easily and quickly, you just lost the whole reason for setting up Kevin Price, Inc.
Okay, so kind of get us step by step. So a guy has a company, say like a guy has a company and he wants to do something a little different. It's complementary, but not exactly like his, original intent. But it makes sense for it to be a part of the original entity. What can he do to operate with that new name that makes more sense for marketing purposes and still make sure he has protected liability?
Well, it's actually a pretty simple procedure, Kevin. You file a form with the Texas Secretary of State that says, hey, state, my company, for example, Kevin Price, Inc., wants to do business as Kevin Price Radio Show. So we file that form that says to the world, on file, public records, the Secretary of State's office, that you are doing that. It gets approved and it's on file. Likewise, if you do that business in Harris County, you do a assumed name filing in the real property records at the clerk's office. And so there is a record somewhere. So a year down the road, you get sued as Kevin Price Radio Show. It shows up, hey, Kevin Price Radio Show is an assumed name of this corporation you set up the year before. Well, every time you use that name or whatever the reasoning for the liability, you now have corporate liability protections, not personal liability. Which is
you create this entity, and you need to go down, and then apparently you need to do it in both offices, both the Secretary of State and the county assessor?
Right, the county you do business, or every county in Texas. And so, yeah, you would do it in both places.
Right. And so when you go, what do? Just bring proof of your corporation?
You would you fill out the form online. We can do that online with the Secretary of State, and you mail the form with the clerk's office in the county you do the business. There's a small nominal filing fee, and truly that's it. And that little step right there is going to save your clients, your listeners, significant amounts of money. So another problem is, even if you drop that Inc., again, for the example, Kevin Price Inc., say you choose to do business just as Kevin Price. Well, because you've dropped that Inc., you're telling the world that's a different entity. That's something different than the entity you chose to file with the Secretary of State. That's a huge deal, too. People do it all the time. Well, make sure you have an assumed name so that everyone knows, here's all the names Kevin Price Inc. does business as.
Right. Interesting. So, and this is something else to think about. If you got your entity originally, where you got it under your own name because you didn't think you were going to be big enough to ever have a company, once you become a company, you better make sure you change that domain over or that DBA over to your company. Transfer it. Correct?
Absolutely. Any name that your corporation, your LLC, your LT, whatever you want that entity to do business as, to hold yourself out to the world as operating some business, selling those goods as a service, you better have that form, both with the Secretary of State and the counties you do business in, on file.
What a great practical topic. People all the time, all they're trying to do is grow their business, expand their business, but they need to also be mitigating potential liability. And, that's very hands-on, very practical advice from Marc Krasney. Well, I encourage you to get more information about Marc. Marc, your website for people to learn more.
Yes, KrasneyLawFirm.com, KRASNEY lawfirm.com.
KrasneyLawFirm.com. Encourage you to check it out. Thanks so much for being with us today. Great topic.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Kevin.
You bet. When we come back, much more for you. And you're listening to The Price of Business.